What's up everyone, my name's Lou. It's my mission to aid your awakening, and in this video I'm going to discuss stories and how much of an impact stories have on our everyday reality, on our everyday lives. We are so run by stories, it's unbelievable, and we live in a world which encourages us to create stories about ourselves. I'm not just talking about social media here, I'm talking about on every single level identifying with this character. Now the biggest part of becoming more conscious is realizing that you are not this character you are identifying with, and you only realize that through unveiling your own story and letting go of your story. But first you must become conscious of how your story is running you and the different ways in which story is running your reality. How many of you think every day, I'm just not good enough? How many of you wake up and feel, I'm just not good enough, I'm not good enough? Why aren't you good enough? Because you're comparing yourself to an ultimately phantom form of yourself that doesn't actually exist. And ultimately, if you keep trying to aim at making it exist, you will never exist as that thing. It's like a constant phantom that's always ahead of you. It takes you out of the moment. This is the feeling of not being good enough. It's the constant comparison with yourself, but also seeing your story in a negative way, because we are run and surrounded by things that make us not want to feel enough. And that's the basis and that's the structure of how a capitalist society we live in works. And in every way, that's not always a bad thing. But the bad thing is that we are run by a story that we aren't even fully conscious of. You may think you're fully conscious of it, just like I thought I was fully conscious of my story. You know, I could rehearse to someone how I grew up, what I was interested in, things I liked. Now you hear me talk about this before, is the idea of letting go of your beliefs. Because the one thing that's holding you back big time is belief. How can you even be in the moment or even listen to a new perspective if you're so attached to beliefs? Beliefs is one massive part of a story. But another is this attempt at characterizing ourselves as an attempt at playing a certain character. Now one thing that I realized massively for me, particularly when I was living in a very self-destructive way, in which I was ruining my health, in which I was taking things I shouldn't have been, I think you know what I mean by that, and ultimately living very unhealthy and very inauthentically to myself. And the reason I was, because I was chasing a phantom form of myself, and this took the form of following things or people I wanted to be like. Like, that one of them would be Jim Morrison. I think I'll post something on my Instagram about this one. He used to have long hair. This was someone I idealized and I idolized to a certain extent, and it's someone who I obviously wanted to be like. But what is that really telling us? And what's the mindset behind wanting to be like someone else? You're confirming to yourself and affirming to your subconscious. And we'll break down and get into the subconscious later and the importance of that. You're affirming to yourself constantly that you are not enough and you must be like someone else, and you're not living from a state of proactivity, a state of presence. You're acting from a state of reactivity and reacting to external circumstances, and ultimately this is stopping you from really authentically expressing yourself and being who you want to be. The first thing we're going to talk about is associations now, and this has to do with labels. Because ultimately you want to be free thinking, you want to be thinking for yourself and not be taught how to think. Because of labels, we are told a way to think, we are told a way to associate with certain states of being, with certain words. This comes in the form of the label, such as labeling yourself as being happy. Such a convoluted label, and yet we're constantly trying to attain it and also move away from a label which has much more negative connotations and resistance in our mind, such as the term depressed. Now if you look at it this way, these are separate states of being which arise in you not out of thought but out of pure emotion. It's pure emotional expression, free of attachments, free of any sort of mental association you may make with it. Now the way you can look at this is by thinking, when you hear the words depressed, what does that conjure up in your mind? And what do you associate with that? When you say the words, I feel depressed, or even hear someone else say it, what sort of emotion does that spark up within you? Does that spark a resistance, fear? Oh no, they're depressed. Oh no, maybe I'm depressed. This is a really bad thing. This isn't getting me closer to the person I want to be. Feeding that into your story. You're constantly reaffirming things. So if I were to say to you, guys, it's amazing to be depressed. It's amazing. It's amazing. Every day we should go out in the world and try and be as depressed as we can. So when you feel what you think to be depressed, you're actually happy. Likewise, if I say, it's horrible to be happy, never be happy, never, 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 try to avoid that at all costs, try to avoid being happy at all costs. If I were to say to that, I'd be careful with sorry. If I were to say to that, if I were to say that, never ever be happy, then when you don't feel what you think to be happy, or you think, I'm not happy now, by default, you know you've attained something that you wanted to attain, and by default, you are happy. So when you think, oh, I'm finally not happy, yes, you experience the emotion of happiness. This shows that our labels don't matter. If I was to say you, it's great to be anxious, always feel anxious, when you actually do become anxious, you're suddenly happy that you're anxious, and then all the anxiety goes away. The reason it keeps coming back is, like I say in all my videos, resistance makes it stronger. Resistance to that thing makes the thing stronger. Most of us, we're not actually anxious, we just feel bad for being anxious. And that in itself reaffirms that you are anxious, so you're attached to this story, so you continue to be anxious. This is something I had to really wake up to and get away with, because I was constantly telling myself I was depressed. And the fact is, I was ashamed of feeling that, so I was so ashamed of it that I didn't want to tell anyone else I was depressed, because it had this negative attachment, this negative association, the negative connotation along with it. I mean, in Japan they see smiling as a sign of sadness. You know, there's not one default natural state. Emotions are innate within us and they're not processed by the mind. You can't label an emotion. It simply is a state of being. It's something that can't be too loosely identified with a word, with an association. Just take the word themselves. Can you feel good, yet also discuss negative things? If you can't, then you've got two, this is a great test by the way, to tell if you're too deeply associated with emotional, labels and emotional associations. If you were to say right now, I feel sad, can you do it can you separate the word and the emotion? Otherwise, if you can't do that, if it's bringing you down, just even hearing the word or even saying the word, then that shows you've got too much of an emotional connection with a label, with a thing which is just a word, describing word. It shouldn't make you feel bad just saying it. Say, I feel sad. I feel sad, I feel sad, I feel sad today, I feel so sad today. Oh dude, should have seen me yesterday, saddest day of my life. The saddest day of my life. Equally, flip it again. I feel so happy. Why do I have to have such a great life? Why do I have to be so happy? Oh, can't believe I'm happy. Everything's going the way I want it to go. I'm so happy. You see that? Can you separate the thought? It's quite fun to do. I think practice it, and this is something I've learned from my other friends and people that are really thriving and really living without this thing that's ultimately restricting your bandwidth and really limiting and restricting what you can do in life, because you're being weighed down. And ultimately, it's almost like a denser energy associated with certain words. You want to get to the point where all words are just lie, all words you can withdraw from, and it's not harder to bring out certain words than it is before. And it's all about just cleaning your overall state of mental thought. So it's all about what you choose to identify with, and because by default, whether or not you're conscious or not, you're always reaffirming things. Now it's your choice to no longer be a victim, no longer tell yourself a story that it's not fair, they're all against me. You can choose to be that, or you can choose to take more of a proactive approach. Stop reacting to life's externalizing, stop externalizing all these events and making it into a story, and instead see that there is no one true thing. Everything can be interpreted differently. Everything is, by default, interpreted differently by every single person in the world. Sees you and sees everything that happens differently. The more concrete your story is, the more concrete your ego is, this idea and your image you have of yourself, that's going to stop you from seeing the fact that everything can be seen in a different way. This is all about taking conscious control and deciding today, right now, you're going to change your story. Right now, you don't feel good enough, you're going to start feeding yourself, you're going to start saying, I feel good enough. And those negative stories you have of yourself, don't be ashamed to share it. You've got to be strong enough, and this is what really happened to me, is that eventually I got to the point where I was suffering so much I had to spill it out. It's going to get to the point, if you're going to keep reinforcing a negative story, that you've got to tell someone. But that's good, because you're externalizing it. You're taking the shame away by sharing it, and you can receive positive feedback from others. And you can get out of this loop of feeling like something else this is just the way it's been, this is the way it's been, my life's been so hard, my life's been this way, it's been that way. Because that's a way of ultimately not really getting to the root of the pain, but rather soothing the pain. You're not really getting to the root of it until you start saying, I'm going to take conscious control, until you start saying, this is who I am good enough. Start affirming things. I've been getting more into affirmations recently, do it every day, right while I meditate. I allow myself to get into a present state, but then I also want to get into the state where I can start programming, start planting seeds. So to come back to this idea of removing labels and ultimately allowing yourself to detach from these parameters you've already set, which unfortunately you're restricting your mental bandwidth. Like I said, you're not seeing reality for what it is, because you're seeing everything instead of a neutral, instead of a good or a bad situation, a good or a bad thought. There's no such thing. In fact, everything is simply neutral to an extent. Frederick Dodson in the book Levels of Energy says one of the highest levels you can attain is just seeing everything in a neutral way. The reason that you can't do this is because you're associating what happens to you to fit into your story. I think I embarrassed myself. I think maybe I didn't stand up to that level in which I wanted them to perceive me at. I think, and you're harking back to the past, you can't get present because you're seeing everything through this story, through this idea of this self-image, which is restricting the way you live. So to get back to neutrality, one example for me was realizing that you can't not do meditation. I always sat down, and I used to meditate from the age of 16 to 18 in the very same way. I used to sit down cross-legged, hands together, and I closed my eyes, and I got to this lovely, this blissful place, this dark place I do before bed. It put me right to sleep. And when I started waking up, I'd lost that center. And I felt like, well, I just can't meditate now. I couldn't stand still, I couldn't keep my eyes still, concentrate on one thing, till I realized that there was never a good or bad way of doing it. And actually, the reason I couldn't do it is because I felt there was a proper way of doing it, and that I couldn't do it because of that. When I was at university and my emotions were flaring up and I had thoughts racing around in my head, I thought there's no way I can meditate. But actually, meditation is simply sitting down and being with yourself. Instead of being with a story that you're lost with, just be with what's going on now. That's how you develop this presence. That's how you eventually, once you've done a lot of emotional clearing, start to become embodying presence, where you're always in a meditative-like state, walking around. In reality, you're always mindful of your body. You're always at peace with it. You're not trying to move things, not trying to change things. That's a huge shift you'll take as well. And the huge shift for me, just like when I was trying to be like mimic certain people and be like certain idols I had, because I was insecure within myself and I constantly reaffirming that I wasn't good enough, that shift of saying, what would their mindset be like? Instead of trying to act like them, what's their mindset like? If you take away £1 million from a millionaire that's made the money, it's likely he has adopted and gained, he or she has gained the mindset to make that back. Whereas if you simply give it to someone who has no idea how to make that sort of money, they will lose it, and that's happened in lottery winners in the past. There's tons of examples of that. I'm sure you've heard that before. The end goal doesn't mean anything. It's about, and I've said this before, about embodying the characteristics along the way to getting that thing. Yeah, I want to have these things. Yeah, I want to level up. Yeah, I want to earn more of an income. Yeah, I want to be a successful entrepreneur. But I want to do that not because that's what I get at the end. It's because I'm transforming myself in the process of getting there. It's all about the journey, and that shift's key. And the other shift of realizing that there is no good or bad, that simply sitting down to meditate is meditating. And the thing that was stopping me was thinking that I can't meditate. Every time I sat down, I'm not doing this right, I'm not doing this right, I'm not doing this right. Once you let go of that outcome, you're more proactive, and you realize once there's no right or wrong, you have complete freedom to do what you want to do. You have complete freedom to freely think, to freely express yourself. In order to be more free, let go of these associations, guys. Like I said, experience the emotion, but don't label it. Experience the pain, experience the hardship, but don't label it. And keep your eyes focused on attaining that higher mindset, that even in your hardest, darkest days, you keep your head focused on the characteristics you want to embody, because deep down you know that this is fine, this is happening for a reason. And that's why we should all get a bit more free. And with that, we get blessings, blessings, blessings. Thank you very much, guys. Peace and love, guys. Bye-bye.